Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board special meeting and work session for January 21st, 2020. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Meyer.
Present.
Councilmember Shaw.
Present.
Councilmember Wiltshire.
Present.
And Supervisor Levenberg.
I'm here. Okay, so first I would just like to say thank you to our team of Highway and Parks personnel who kept the town roads safe in the snow that we experienced on Saturday, as well as making sure that our public parks and spaces were cleared as quickly as possible. Also, it was wonderful to get together with so many from our community at various events this weekend commemorating Dr. King's legacy. KJ Dennert performed, and Sarah White gave a very moving speech before some Gimme the Mic students played for the Cooperative Scholarship Fundraiser at Ossining High School. And then our community got together at Star of Bethlehem Church with our Briarcliff Ossining Ministerial Association faith leaders to commemorate Dr. King and talk about the meaning of his message for all of us. It was a wonderful evening, and I highly recommend that you add it to your calendars for next year if you've never been to either one of these events. Are absolutely fantastic. I have a few messages from town department heads that I'd like to share. Dale Cemetery Superintendent Pete Connolly would like to remind everyone to please pick up any seasonal decorations from Dale Cemetery or Sparta Cemetery by Monday, January 27th. Otherwise, the decorations will be removed and disposed of by our cemetery staff. If you have any questions, please call the cemetery office at 914-941-1155. Also, it is tax collection month once again. Those months just keep on coming. Second half school taxes for the Ossining and Briarcliff school districts are due on January 31st. And it's been very busy here at 16 Croton with everybody paying their taxes. You can make payment in person, by mail. Make sure you witness the postmark to ensure timely delivery. Even a postmark, though, does not ensure delivery. Or online at townofossining.com. Be wary of online bill pay from your bank because those mail pieces are not postmarked. And if the receiver gets your check after January 31st, you will be assessed a penalty. Or you can utilize our dedicated mailbox at the Ossining Post Office, and I believe that it gets postmarked by 5 o'clock. That if it's in by 5 o'clock, it gets postmarked for the day that you turned it in. The tax office will be open extended hours on Thursday, January 30th and Friday, January 31st from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Please call 914-762-8790 or email receiver Holly Perlowitz at hperlowitz, Perlowitz, Z as in zebra, at townofossining.com if you need to check any information whatsoever. This is a tax payment you do not want to be late on because the penalty is 10%. Holly and her team are happy to help you come up with a strategy to ensure your payment is made timely. You can also sign up for direct messages from Holly on the town's website. Thanks so much to Holly and Pete and all of our department heads for their hard work serving our community. Senator David Carlucci is holding a meeting of his student advisory group on Thursday, January 23rd from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Ossining Public Library. This is open to any and all Ossining or Briarcliff High School students. Contact Stanley Dorsonville at Senator Carlucci's office at DOR, S as in Sam, AIN, V as in Victor, at nysenate.gov to learn more. In honor of Holocaust Remembrance Day, the Ossining Library will be presenting the performance Hiding Anne Frank on Thursday, January 23rd at 7 p.m. in the Boudars Theater, which promises to be both fascinating and entertaining. This performance focuses on the woman who hid the Frank family in Holland. Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff has her annual town meetings lined up for January and February, starting on Saturday, January 25th at the Desmond Fish Library in Garrison at 10 a.m. and the Field Library in Peekskill at 1 p.m. Assemblywoman Galiff will be closer to home at the Briarcliff Manor Library on Thursday, February 6th at 7 p.m. This Saturday, January 25th, is the Westchester Collaborative Theater's Midwinter Dance Party with DJ Johnny J, starting at 7:30 p.m. at 23 Water Street. Join this local non profit for a fun-filled evening of music as part of their 10th anniversary season. Think you know everything about Ossining? Test your Ossining knowledge at the Ossining Trivia at Sing Sing Kill Brewery on Wednesday, January 29th, starting at 7:30 p.m., hosted by village historian Dana White. I hear town historian Scott Craven will also be making a special guest appearance with some questions focusing on Hudson River trivia. This event is free to enter and is sure to get pretty competitive. You know these people who live here in Ossining, you know we're a pretty competitive bunch. So come on out, especially those who are historically oriented. Save the date, Saturday, February 15th at 12 noon for Galata House's third annual Escape from Sing Sing Plunge at our very own Lewis Engle Park Beach. Register now or become a sponsor. The proceeds fund the Galata House's many deserving causes. Visit galatahouse.org for more information. You know I will be plunging. Brr. Can't wait. And I think that is it for my announcements. I just wanted to also mention that this morning I attended the Sustainable Westchester annual meeting, and I would say that because of Sustainable Westchester and all the good work that we have been doing here in Westchester County, we really are on the cutting edge of making enormous changes and really fulfilling some of the carbon emissions goals of the state. Sustainable Westchester is a consortium of multiple municipalities throughout Westchester County. They've helped us with electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging station infrastructure. They've helped us. They formed the original community choice aggregation, Westchester Power, and have worked to basically increase demand for sustainable power generation, and they're continuing to do good work on behalf of all of the communities that are members, and I anticipate they will continue to do so. So we believe that membership has been very fruitful, and we look forward to more good announcements coming out of our relationship with them in the not-too-distant future, including that we had introduced the Recollect app for unincorporated town residents to help you sort out when you can put out which kind of garbage, which kind of days, and how you can get help for both refuse and recycling of anything that you need to get help with. So with that, do any of my colleagues have any other announcements? Do you want to talk again about VITA, just to remind people about?
The VITA program out of IFCA, which is the Volunteer Income Tax, can't think of what the A is. Thank you, assistance. It starts February 3rd, but you can call the office at 941-5252 to make an appointment starting earlier this week. So if you know anyone who lives and works in New York State and makes under $54,000, they are eligible for the program. Give us a call.
Anything else? Anything else? Okay. So with that, we're going to go into our public comment on agenda items only. Is there anybody here who would like to make any public comment on our one agenda item for our special meeting? Okay. So with that, let's just go right into our one board resolution.
Sure. Town Planning Consultant Nelson Pope and Voorhees LLC. Resolved, the town supervisor is authorized to execute an agreement retaining Nelson Pope and Voorhees LLC as the town's planning consultant for 2020.
Do I have a motion?
Second.
So this year, we are saying goodbye to our longtime planner and friend, David Stolman, from FP Clark and Associates, who has served the town for decades. David has been such an asset to the town and certainly a familiar face to many. He's worked with hundreds of planning boards, I believe, and many variety of our staff over the years. We thank David for his decades of service to the Austin community and all of the incredible work that he has done on projects ranging from simple two-lot subdivisions to comprehensive plans. He has touched nearly all of our existing policies on planning and zoning and probably every inch of the town somehow or another. And we're, again, very grateful for all that he's brought to the town up to till now. We're also excited for the future with Nelson Pope and Voorhees LLC with Valerie Monastra, who will serve as the primary contact for the town. Valerie is also a familiar face around Ossining as she lives in the village with her family and served as the Village of Ossining's planner for 10 years before entering private practice. Valerie has the best combination of institutional knowledge of our community and innovative thinking for this role. I'm confident that Valerie will do an excellent job helping us navigate all of the projects on our horizon, including assisting us with the comprehensive plan as we bring our steering committee on board and look to select another planning firm to take the lead on the plan for Town of Ossining. So welcome, Valerie. Excited. Can I have, so all those in favor? Aye.
Abstain?
And I was going to ask for that, but since you already, that's fine. Okay. And thank you for that, and that's because of your relationship with IFCA. So next up, we are going to I'd ask for a motion to adjourn to work session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, fantastic. So we are moving to our work session, and the first item is to a discussion of the comprehensive plan steering committee size and composition. And we ask Valerie Menostra, who's sitting right here from Nelson Pope and Voorhees, to please join us to give the town board some guidance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I have,
Welcome.
thank you. I'm very excited to be here. So I have a couple handouts that I'm gonna walk you through everything, but just for.
Also, you could theoretically sit at the table if you'd like. It's up to you.
Oh, if you
Do you want
want me
to sit
I
at the
can do
table?
that.
Yeah, I think that would be nice. Okay.
Oh, then I can pass them out.
You can start doing your presentation. Thank you.
All right, so I provided the board both the copy of the actual town law, the section 272A, which speaks about the town comprehensive plan. So that's just a little bit of background information as you go through this process. It talks a little bit about the legislative findings and intent, the contents of a comprehensive plan, and then the actual process of to develop the comprehensive plan and for its approvals. But one of the things that I'm here to talk to you about tonight is actually the steering committee itself. So section 272A actually allows for the town to appoint, to prepare the comprehensive plan, either the town board themselves, you could appoint the planning board to do so, or you could appoint a special board. So I think at this point, it's the intent of the town board to actually create the comprehensive plan and then create a committee. But that being said, if for some reason you end up creating a special board, you'll probably want corporation counsel to weigh in on that, but that might potentially require opens meetings laws associated with that special board. But for a committee itself, it doesn't necessarily fall within the very specific open meeting laws requirements, although we do have certain recommendations for a committee, for committee members for the comprehensive plan steering committee. First, that we would suggest that you have no more than about 12 members, because anything more than that gets a little bit unwieldy. That being said, if for some reason you end up with 13 or 14, you know, it's just 12 is usually just a general ballpark. If you are going to have, if you're going to provide the committee the ability to actually vote, then we would advise doing even number of people on the committee versus, odd number of people, I was gonna say, versus even number of people.
Got it. Right.
And then again, you know, if it's just an advisory committee, then even number is fine. One of the other questions that a lot of communities ask us is dealing with the actual steering committee representation and the types of committee members. And so what I did was I outlined a number of, you know, again, you don't have to necessarily have each and every type of committee member on the steering committee. It really is just, it's up to each community, and it's just to give you a little bit of thought of who you might want on your committee. First and foremost, definitely at least one town board member. I think that's extremely important for them to see the process through and make as many meetings as possible and all the public meetings. A land use board members, we would definitely suggest having somebody from your planning board, ZBA. I know you don't necessarily have an active landmarks preservation committee, but it is on your books technically. So, but if somebody maybe of some sort of, you know, historic you know, knowledge or background, and then environmental advisory committee. mostly because all of these different committees represent various laws and regulations, and also especially dealing with land use that you'll be discussing as part of the comprehensive plan process. We also recommend for having an economic development community representative, and that could be in the form of either business owners, local developers, somebody from the Chamber of Commerce, or real estate professionals as part of that, because they'll be able to weigh in on when you're dealing with your economic development policies, and also how different land use regulations or recommendations would affect the economic development of an area. Another type of committee member is usually community development or organization representatives, and this would include any sort of community development activities or organizations that are focused on like housing, health, or social services, something again that you think that would be very valuable, or even if it's something, even if it's, for example, like, well, I'll use Open Door. While they might not necessarily be located in the town, they are located in the village and they do serve town residents. So those are the types of things you might want to consider as well. And then town residents, clearly that is extremely important. And when I say town residents, I mean those that are actually living within the town of Ossining. You'll definitely want to consider having a few of those residents on the boards. And we usually recommend having people that have various stages of life, ethnicity, familial status, as well as neighborhood representation. I think that's another important thing that a lot of communities sometimes overlook is, are you really representing the town, people geographically throughout the town? And then the other final big ticket item that I think is really important for a steering committee is Parks and Recreation. So either having somebody from a member of the Recreation Advisory Board or somebody from the Parks Department part of the steering committee, because there is a lot of discussion usually in a comprehensive plan dealing with open space preservation, parks, active recreation, that type of thing. So that being said, there is over 12, you could easily get 12 people or more on your steering committee. And one of the other things that usually comes up a lot in discussions about a steering committee is town staff. So we usually recommend having either, it could be if there is particular staff that's going to be assigned to the committee, especially somebody that's going to intimately go through the process, then that is fine. If not, for example, if I were to help move this comprehensive plan through the process, then part of my job would be then to consult with this town staff and bring them in on an as-needed basis. So it's really up to you how you decide to proceed. If there is somebody in particular that you think is really important for them to attend all those meetings, then definitely do so. The other thing with town staff that can, to get their input and assisting with the developments of the, request for proposal, or if, also with selecting the planning consultant, if you think that that's an important part of the process, they could be involved in that. And then as well as, having somebody from the town to actually prepare summaries of the different meetings and stuff like that, and minutes, because that alleviates the responsibilities from the committees. And again, when I say town staff, if it's somebody, if you choose to have, myself do that, that's fine. If you have somebody else from this town, but it should be somebody that's consistent through the process, because it's really important with all the different coordination between the committees, the agendas, as well as the other various town staff, that you have somebody that is really well aware of what's going on and what's taking place and how to keep it moving forward through the process. So you don't necessarily have to have town staff as part of the steering committee, but you could decide to if that's what you would like. And then finally, one of the things that I also think is important is sitting down with the steering committee and kind of going through the responsibilities of the members. And so, one, we think it's important that they make recommendations to the town board, potentially in the selection of a planning consultant. Now, again, if the town board chooses to not include the steering committee in those conversations, that is fine. But sometimes it is a little help if, maybe even a select few from the steering committee to actually weigh in on the presentations. review documents and information presented by the consultants. Clearly, the committee would also provide feedback and ideas on the goals, objectives, and recommendations throughout the process, and also contribute to the development of the community engagement process. I think that's really important, because if the committee feels that they're part of the community engagement process, that will also help people, the public, feel that they're part of the process as well. And also have them participate in meetings and workshops. I mean, I think I think we've all seen committees where you have people assigned who want to just show up to a meeting but not really actually do the work. And in this case, for comprehensive plans, it's really important to get them to be an advocate for the plan, to also be available to the public for them to actually, weigh in, because not everybody's going to be able to go to the public meetings, but if they're out there in the public, then, they'll be able to also hear feedback from the public and not necessarily always in a meeting setting. And then, finally, I think the other thing is really gathering input throughout the process from anybody, any organizations. Sometimes it'd be great if a committee member can fall in more than one bucket, because, for example, if for some reason somebody is associated with a social organization, but it also happens to be a land use board member, therefore you can,
Check 2 boxes.
yes, exactly. So, I think the bottom line is a steering committee can be very flexible. It can really be what you want. But I think usually I would recommend that a steering committee really focuses on what are the needs of the community and where do you think this comprehensive plan is probably really going to focus. And so bringing those people to the table. So, for example, if the community knows that they're really going to be dealing with certain business corridors, you want to definitely make sure you have business people involved. If you're going to be dealing with, large tracts of areas in residential, and zones, then you're definitely going to want to make sure the residents of those particular areas are definitely part of this, the steering committee.
Awesome. I would just say that we started interviews today, this afternoon, and I think we interviewed about half of our, 14 applicants, and, we do have a breadth of, applicants in certain areas, but not in all areas that have been mentioned here. And we have, I can't remember how tomorrow's group fleshes out in terms of adding to that breadth, but we have already invited our assessor to be part of the steering committee, as well as a member of our planning board who also has, I would say, an environmental bent, because one of the tasks for us for this comprehensive plan as part of the grant that we received is a comprehensive plan with sustainability elements. So we wanted to make sure that somebody who has some knowledge and background maybe of some of those issues would be helpful, especially from the planning board. We have also, as part of the grant, are going to be working with PACE for some of the public engagement portion of this, so I'm not exactly sure how that's going to parse out between the planning board, the planning consultant that would be the RFP winner, as well as between you and PACE and that person. I think we're just going to have to kind of work out internally what the best use of everybody's time is and how we're going to account for all of that. We do have a portion of matching that we're required. There's a match that's required for the town. So we just have to work out some of those details from the grant perspective to figure that out. And I believe, and also Victoria is going to be participating in the steering committee also. So, and then Jackie is the board member that will be participating. She lives in unincorporated. Also, Jackie, with the two-hat theory, has been our liaison to three-hat?
And the
Rec Advisory Board,
Right.
three-hat theory, right? Rec Advisory Board plus IFCA. I think that those are, so having housing needs and also having the Rec Advisory Board perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean we wouldn't want to bring some staff in to talk about those on specific occasions. But I think right now, from the staff perspective, that would be who we'd like, unless there's somebody else that anybody thinks should not just be brought in for specific, like when we're talking about this or when we're talking about that, because I think we're definitely gonna need staff to be brought in for those conversations when we're getting into specific areas. I don't know. This is a work session, so please feel free to, discuss if there's anything that you feel. I will just say that, we had a couple of applicants from our business community, and, people, again, from some people who live in the condo, some people who live in single-family home. Everybody so far, except for people who applied from the business community, lives in unincorporated. And that's kind of, and then some people come to us with, some architectural, some planning background, some people from having been involved in, local government, PTA. I mean, we have kind of a mishmash in terms of age spread. We have people, seniors and people who are, just starting families. So in terms of applicants, I would say that from that, I don't think we have a diverse makeup at all of our applicants, as I could see it so far, so, unless tomorrow we shall see.
Right.
But, I will just, that's my perspective, and I don't know that anybody, oh, no, that's not true. I was gonna say if anybody from Crotonville, but we did have an applicant from Crotonville. And,
Also, yeah.
also planning board members lives in Crotonville, so,
Well, and I think, and that's one of the, like, once you establish a steering committee, then that's part of the coordination. So if you do find yourself, like, let's say, for example, there's a particular group that you feel that is lacking in the steering committee, that's when you can make an extra effort to even have a focus group with, like, an organization or a group, so.
Got it.
It doesn't, and not everybody in the community has to be represented in the steering committee, as just many as possible, especially, and then that's part of the public process.
Right.
Is trying to reach out to those that, are still an important stakeholder within the community, but maybe not as fully represented on the steering committee as well. That would be coordinated throughout the process. And I think, like, with PACE, I know they're gonna do some community outreach or whatever the consultants are that you bring on board. I think a lot of it will be trying to identify not only when you hold those public meetings and workshops, but at what are the agendas at those meetings and what are the goals? Because at some point, you're gonna wanna assess, you typically have a public meeting to talk about existing conditions and what are the situations and get feedback off of that. And then you'll go into more public meetings about what types of recommendations are coming out of the steering committee. And then ultimately you have you'll definitely have to have a public hearing on the comprehensive plan itself.
right. Okay, there's one other thing I wanted to say.
And once we get a planner, we'll be able to reach back out to Cornell and ask them for their data
Yes, I mean.
that they might share with us.
Oh, yeah, no, they're definitely, all that information is going to come back.
So during the climate adaptive workshop, the students did an incredibly deep dive about the current situations in Ossining, how we got here and everything else, and they were not willing, particularly, they didn't want to take away work from a planner, which they're all going to be becoming, but they said they would share with the planner that the firm that we had chosen. And I feel like they did a really in-depth deep dive, and that would be a nice jumping off point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And all data, it's always great to start with existing data. And existing analysis.
I mean, it's actually interesting, though. We just got, we had applied to develop our own local waterfront revitalization plan through the CFA process, which we didn't receive. And we went and did a debrief with the Department of State, I think is the department that grants the LWRP funds. And one of the things that they said is that we really don't have any jurisdiction except in the water for any of the waterfront property. The Village of Austin has jurisdiction. So that was one of the key reasons why they didn't grant us. And we're going now to get a possible legal evaluation from the Department of State, if we show them the water, the other, like the Croton River tributary, to see if they would allow an LWRP to encompass some of that, because it's a, tributary of the Hudson, which they weren't sure about, since we do have jurisdiction along other pieces of, the waterfront property, if you can include the Croton River, and obviously that little piece that's by St. Augustine's. So that was very interesting, but just to your point, I mean, the CAD studio designs are mostly focused on, the waterfront properties, of which we have very little jurisdiction, except for our park. But even our park, we have the ability to create a plan and master plan, et cetera, but it's still in the village. I'm just saying, it's just interesting to think about it in that context, that ultimately. So we did actually speak today with the village about potentially applying for a grant and we haven't even talked to Briarcliff yet about this. We have to ask them if they even be interested, because they don't have an LWRP, but to do like a 3 municipality LWRP for the waterfront and possibly tributary, which maybe would, for grant, a grant application to see if we could get, or grant for an LWRP, to see if we could get anywhere with that. So anyway, that maybe would give us some more tools then to work on our plan for the waterfront.
For those listening at home, LWRP is?
Oh, I started with that.
Okay, sorry.
Local Waterfront Revitalization Plan, LWRP. for
I
those listening
believe
at home.
the Engel waterfront property, that's identified in the village's LWRP, but the village's LWRP is silent to that
Exactly.
property.
Exactly, exactly. And
So-
that's one of the kind of the issues of,
Yes.
right, would be to try to expand what's in it, but it's not something that I think the village is looking to take on anytime soon. However, if we were to get a grant that would incorporate everybody, so then maybe we could do something. We don't exactly know, but I'm just letting people know that that's part of our conversation from this week. The other thing that I wanted to mention that you were commenting on, I just wanted to see really, about staff we talked about. I just wanted to clarify that I think the town board had already decided, and we postponed the RFP specifically because we decided we wanted to establish the steering committee in advance, so that the steering committee in some form, whether it's a smaller group of the steering committee or the entire steering committee, could weigh in on the RFP before it goes out. So we have made that determination already. I think that's why we're now in this, where we're, trying to get that together so that we can then get everybody sign off on the RFP, at which we've gotten some feedback from Pace about already. And so we have a draft of something that we can then get reactions to and then go from there.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah. So there's that. Anybody have any other thoughts about this, of what you're, like, there must-haves?
I had a question. Can we go back to the pros and cons of a voting committee versus a non-voting?
Sure. So in some communities, they actually have the committee itself really just drive the process.
Okay.
And they're the ones that ultimately vote which recommendations go in or don't go into the comprehensive plan. In a lot of communities, it's the town board that ultimately steers the comprehensive plan and the content of the comprehensive plan. And so the committee is more advisory. And when I say advisory, it's, they really do steer the process, but at the end, they provide that village board or town board the comprehensive plan for them to review and then to adopt. And the town board would have the ability to, look at the content and tweak things as you see fit. So it ultimately becomes the town board's document versus a committee's document.
What are the pros and cons?
I think the pros and cons, I think really if you're interested in maintaining authority over the comprehensive plan, then you would want to not necessarily have a separate board whose full authority is to develop that comprehensive plan. In communities that do that, it's usually communities, maybe it's like certain smaller communities or communities that really just want the political officials do not want to be involved in the comprehensive plan process, and they really just want to hand it off to another board to finalize that process itself. And you want to say
Well,
anything?
but it would ultimately be the town board that would have to adopt any legislation
Yes.
to facilitate and actually put into effect local laws based upon what's in the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan is generally policies. And then your zoning is kind of furthered by what's in the comp plan, but the town board is the only board under state law that can enact legislation.
Yes. And it's usually best to set this up ahead of time, just so that the committee understands what their role is and what their authority is.
Do you find that it can be difficult for things to move out of the committee if they're not voting on it? That if the committee doesn't come to some sort of consensus to say, yes, we're moving forward with this item, or we're moving forward with that item, if they're not really taking an action, is it hard for things to kind of move along, or does it seem to run smoothly without doing that?
No, I think in general, like the consultants that will be involved in the comprehensive plan process, they'll be able to move it through with like a general consensus of the committee. The committee, is good because you will find that not everybody, as you know, not everybody will see the same, come to the same conclusions. And so it's really a negotiation point to that extent, which is why it's important to have town board members involved and land use board members involved, because they all come from different perspectives. But I think usually the steering committees, you're able to find some sort of consensus. And I think in the, unless there's a really controversial issue, for the most part, I think it's usually nuances that really change things. And as you were saying, it's really the legislation that is the important piece, especially if dealing with any zoning regulations or that type of thing.
And just to follow up on Victoria's point a little bit, is there kind of an official chair or a de facto chair, or would it be the town board member or the planner, or, just kind of like someone who kind of keeps things moving in that direction?
Right.
I mean, I think probably either, you could have the steering committee choose a chair,
Yeah.
or the board could choose a chair.
Right.
Those are options, I would think, right?
Right. And the consultants themselves should be able to, the chair is, like, as you said, a chair is a very good person to identify, because they will keep things moving forward. But that's also the role of the planning consultants too. And then that's also the important piece of, like, when we're talking about town staff or whatever, there just needs to be this constant forward momentum, because if not, comprehensive plans can stall. And so it's really the coordination of everything that's really important.
I just want to ask a question. Do all of the board members have to be from the town? Not nobody out of the village?
So, actually, that's a good question. One of the things that wasn't addressed here, and I sort of remember this being part of the village, because I did serve on the comp plan committee for the village, and I was a school board trustee at the time. I can't remember if I started out just being on the PTA and then I moved to school board. I'm not exactly sure. But there was a representative from the school district in some form or another. I can't remember if it was a board member or not, or two. So I don't know if that's also something that would be recommended. And then, because we've been talking so much about the village is also working on their comp plan, like if maybe we wanted a representation from, a representative from both the Village of Briarcliff and the Village of Austining. Because I know that Briarcliff is also going through a number of, internal looks at what their, how development is proceeding, and I think that they're in a moratorium right now. So if that's something that, we should consider as part of, like, coordination, one member from each, again, or could they be, like, theoretically, I don't know yet, we haven't decided if we want to do voting members or not. I know that we've heard from the community, unincorporated feels like, this is their plan, which it is, and wants to make sure that unincorporated is the one kind of driving the ship on this, which it is. I will just note, that, our parks are also part of this plan, and I guess the only one park is not in unincorporated.
Right.
I mean, and another option you could do is, you could look for, if you are interested in having somebody that lives in the village of Austin and in the village of Briarcliff, if they have another connection to the town of Austining, and not just a village of Austining
Got it. Like, so, right, so a school board member who lives in,
Right, the village of Austining, or,
Right.
somebody who lives in the village of Briarcliff, but also owns a business in the town of Austining.
Right.
Something like that. I mean, that's just another option too.
Got it.
So then they would also be able to come from the perspective of both the town and the village.
right.
So, I mean,
Okay.
there's like, it's like, and there's a lot of possibilities, which is the exciting part of the steering committee. It's also the little bit of the challenging part when you're trying to figure out who should be on a particular steering committee.
Got it. Okay.
I actually did talk with Greenberg's supervisor during the municipal officials dinner, and they said they actually spoke to just their unincorporated ports during their comprehensive plan. They didn't address the village parts. I know we had had a conversation about that, and he said we can call him at any point to talk about their process and how they did that.
I had actually looked into Greenberg's comp plan for unrelated reasons, and what they did is they identified like study areas, like Route 9A, Sawmill River Road, which goes through, which is in both the village of Elmsford and the unincorporated town. And so they kind of identified areas that may be in multiple jurisdictions for future study in going forward, but not necessarily addressed specifically. I mean, they're identified and explained why that would require further study and what the goals would be, but they kind of left the additional studies for a later date. But yeah, that's a good example of something to look into.
Okay, great.
Right, and the thing that I was going to say was
Thank you.
almost like a liaison position or an ex officio or something like that, where, or you have, if we wanted to have people from both villages, but maybe they aren't, if a voting member, but they're more in an advisory, if they're in an advisory role, like, I have this hat on, or I have that hat on, so I'm kind of giving you the perspective of this, because again, we don't live in silo, even though,
All right, well, maybe you can get a Briarcliff volunteer fire person who responds to the town outside, or something like that.
right, or a Briarcliff school board member or something like that, something.
Well, how would you get
I mean,
these people?
village,
But, I mean, isn't part of the whole process or outreach to every single part of our community, townwide, that will be engaged in the conversations and the meetings, and so the steering committee would kind of be doing outreach and looking to engage these people in conversation, like engage hopefully everybody in
Right.
conversation, as many as humanly possible, to have a conversation about a collective vision. So I'm sure we'll be able to incorporate, Briarcliff and
from,
village perspectives in that way also, while not necessarily having every single kind of person on a steering committee.
That was something Dana absolutely highlighted during the interviews, that she would want people to be reaching out to people in the community.
Right.
So,
right, because that was sort of the other thing, I think that,
You did them today, so I didn't have a chance to talk about those.
right, but again, I think that, and this was part of what the feedback from Tiffany at Pace was, that, we want the people on the steering committee to be as much a voice back into the community as they are into the comp plan from the community. It goes both ways, but it's important that we have people who are, communicating back out in, you know, whether they're at a coffee
Conduits to
shop
bring
or in
in.
a condominium or in a neighborhood association or anything else, that we're having, the information is going, flows both ways, not just from one source, because we need a lot of sources to go back out from the comp plan as we're in the process of developing it. So that, I think that is critically important. And as Valerie said, you know, and what you were just talking about, I think it was, if we can't get, if there's somebody who's, we don't have representation on the steering committee from one of these groups, either because it's just getting too big, you know, or whatever, we can target, okay, well, we're now gonna sit down with the planning board from the village and the planning board from, you know, from Austin Village, planning board from Briarcliff Village, and see, you know, what's coming down the pike for them, or
Greater business community, or,
exactly,
you know.
exactly, the two chambers or whatever. So, you know, I think that that's, again, those, we can set up those specific focus groups or whatever to meet with stakeholder groups and get feedback.
Right, that should all be outlined during your, like, your, what they call is community engagement process, right? So the consultant should be able to, will sit down with you and say,
Can you just lean into the?
oh, sorry, the consultants will sit down and, with you and kind of go through what the community engagement process will look like, who they will reach out to, and, you know, how many different meetings they're going to propose. And that's all part of the feedback that you'll need to provide them as to who do you want to make sure that it's part of this process.
What's a typical timeline look like?
It can vary. Usually, you can get it done, you can get a comprehensive plan done in a year, but sometimes they take a little longer, depending upon the complexities of the plan, or, you know, the timing of, like, when you have your public meetings and the public hearings, and then as well as if there's any implementation you know, if you end up deciding to do zoning changes along with, you know, the comprehensive plan, then those can actually, you know, extend a little bit longer, the timeline.
Okay. So, is there anything that you don't think was covered here, board, that you want, or anything that you specifically want to highlight and make sure, like, okay, because I think what the next step would be is for our interviewing committee to come back with recommendations and say, we think this person hits this, this person hits this. Or why we're recommending the specific people, what it is we think that they bring to the table, which is really the questions that we've been asking too, which is, what do you bring that you feel like fleshes out the committee, so that we feel like, you know, we're doing our job. I think that, you know, again, we'll bring that back to the board, and then the board can evaluate the selection from this interviewing committee, and then we will, and just to be clear, the interviewing committee consists of Councilwoman Shaw, myself, Victoria Caffarelli has been sitting in, as well as Fernando Gonzalez, our assessor, and Gareth Huffam from our planning board, who's the planning board. So, as I've been saying to the interview, to the candidates for the steering committee, this is the sort of the internal team that is going to be making up the comp plan steering committee from us. And now we need to work together to figure out who is going to flesh out the rest of these people, the representatives for these people.
Are you on the steering committee, or you're forming the steering committee?
I don't know. Am I on the steering committee? That's a question that I don't know the answer to.
Because we have Jackie, who's going to be on it, wearing all her hats.
Well, I think we usually, I mean, I think if you have more than 3, you're gonna have a quorum, and so.
Right. I mean, I would have thought that I would be part of the steering committee.
I'm asking.
Well, generally, you're ex officio to all
Right.
town committees, right, just by virtue of being the supervisor.
Right.
So, yeah, as long as there's no more than 2 members, I guess that's something that the town board can continue to assess as you're looking at what the rest of the makeup is going to look like. But just because you're not an official member of the committee doesn't mean that the supervisor and certainly the other board members won't have a certain level of involvement throughout the process. So that, I guess that's just something to keep in mind going forward.
And usually, we'll suggest to communities to have like, you know, for the town boards to set up periodic, I guess, you know, updates. So have the consultants come to town board meetings to update you as to where things are, or what are the feedback that they're receiving from the community, that type of thing. So that it keeps you informed, and you're also able to provide feedback throughout the process, and not necessarily at, you know, milestone events like the draft of the plan comes out and you're not able to have, like, that's the first time you're hearing about the recommendations.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that.
And I was just speaking with a town earlier this week who was looking to have 3 out of their 5 board members on their steering committee. And we told them that that was still possible as well. You just have to, you know, you have to do the, right, you have to notice.
Logistically,
and
it would make it a lot
logistically,
more
it's- right, it's
complicated
much
to
more
get that many
complicated,
people
but-
together. And given, I mean, the breadth of different areas of individuals that you're trying to fulfill, I guess you would just have to see if it's worthwhile, and if the board members
Right.
fit those hats.
Right. So, I mean, is it impossible? No. It just has a lot more complexities, which is what we told them too.
Right. Any other comments?
So next steps are,
Next steps are, I think that we're gonna come back to the board with some recommendations for the steering committee, as I mentioned, based on what we believe would be a good breakdown, a good number, and a good breadth of representation for the steering committee.
so next week, 2 weeks.
Well, hopefully, potentially by next week. I think we probably could have it by next week, because we have the rest of the interviews tomorrow. as
Okay,
mentioned.
I'm just wondering.
Well, how many you have for tomorrow?
There are 14 applicants, and do we see 7 today?
7 today.
7 today and 7 tomorrow, yeah. So, okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very helpful, thank you.
And next up, so hoping that everybody had a chance to look through the proposed legislative program by the Association of Towns as far as legislation that they are going to support or oppose this year. This is something that annually we vote on at the convention, which is coming up in a couple of weeks in February. And I am the delegate. Victoria is the alternate, whatever, like assistant delegate, the alternate, in case, if I can't be there. And there's a lot of interesting recommendations here proposed by either local municipalities or sometimes the association. I've looked through them all. I think that they're all reasonable. There might have been one, I can't remember now, which I thought was a little odd, but number 6 is not the one that I think is odd. I mean, so basically the one about cannabis, is saying that the state should allow all municipalities to decide if they want to opt in or not, and not just the state decide blanket, and then only cities or counties can decide to opt in or not. And then if in fact you do opt in, that you also get a piece of the revenue stream that's going to be coming from the sale of cannabis, which right now is not the case. So, especially because, expenses, towns, municipalities would incur expenses related to the sale of cannabis, especially if you're the only community within X number of miles that that has some kind of cannabis sale. And you have to deal with the increased traffic, the whatever kind of other police enforcement that would go along with that. And I'm not saying that anybody on this board is for or against. I'm just saying that if in fact it is available that a town would have the ability to make a decision, or municipality would have the ability to opt in or opt out. And right now, doesn't seem like that's the direction, for a variety of reasons, that the state is going. I think the rest of them, I mean, I don't know, we'll talk to our legislative guru over here, Councilman Meyer. Do you have any thoughts on, I mean, some of them I know are never, ever gonna happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that Association of Towns shouldn't do their best to try to get them passed. Like, I know that the CHIPS money isn't going up, in my humble opinion, which is too bad, or that it's going to be, in that infrastructure improvements would be exempt from the tax cap, which is in here, which they are exempt from school tax cap, but, again,
All right, yeah, see, that would be one I would like, to have it exempt.
most towns would like that. That's why it's in there. That's why it's in
I'm
there.
aware of that.
Yes, but unfortunately, the argument is always that we can decide to exceed the cap by a vote of 3-2.
Well,
A school district to exceed a cap has to go out for a public vote. So,
Oh,
and
And for bonds, the school has to go out for.
right, well, for bonds, the school has to go out for a public vote too, but for, again, a local board could just say, well, we need to build this road, or we need to go out for bond. We need to exceed the cap this year because we're never gonna get this infrastructure project done. If we don't, therefore, this year, we're going to. So, and then 3 votes gets you there. That's it. I mean, not that's it, because obviously you have to deal with repercussions, not that easy, but I'm just saying that's a possibility. And there's certainly been many municipal boards that have exceeded the tax cap versus school boards, they're very few and far between that have exceeded the cap. So I think that I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I believe that's why it is the way it is, but,
you think maybe they could print this in without whoever?
I know, it's so hard to read. I don't know if anybody was trying to read it online, but with the, scanned in, it's impossible to read with that silly thing. I mean, it's their logo on the back, but it's just so hard to read.
The one thing I would point out is, the governor's budget came out today, so I think some of the stuff may probably be a bit fluid as far as priorities from the association.
I actually haven't had a chance, so I literally haven't not looked at the budget all day, so I don't know
Yeah,
if there's
all I
anything.
got was the briefing book. I haven't got the full document yet. But I think there's some lack of clarity about whether or not there was a cut date to municipalities, which would be problematic.
Oh, can you talk closer to the mic?
Sure. And there was a new plan for cannabis, something we just mentioned.
Did it have an opt-in option or no? I doubt, or
haven't seen
opt-out
it yet.
option?
It was just more about the taxes and how much
Everybody would
everybody
get.
would get, yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that's,
increased foundation aid.
It did, but then there's people saying not enough, so.
Never gonna be enough.
Yeah, exactly.
right, so anyway, the other legislation that's in here, support the expansion of cellular and broadband service while preserving local authority as to where, that gets cited. Amend and fund criminal justice reforms. I think this is specifically in relation to the, elimination of monetary bail and, making that something that, is potentially easier for local municipalities to handle. Am I skipping? I think I just skipped one. Talked about the cannabis, I don't remember seeing this resolution number 7, comprehensive real property tax reform. Does anybody remember which this was? These sweet these?
Yeah, that's the one that has what we were just talking about.
Oh, okay, to exceed the cap for
Right, that one.
infrastructure. Right, okay. And then, and shared services, right, I think. To remove barriers to share services. I thought that this was all, for the most part, common sense legislation coming from towns and municipal governments. I don't think that there's anything mind-boggling or really controversial in here. So unless anybody has an issue with any one particular resolution, I guess I would just suggest that we would support them all. Is there anybody who has any issues with anyone in particular or concern that we shouldn't support? I didn't exactly understand the health one, just because I do think that you can opt into the state health plan, and there are a number of cooperative shared programs. I don't know
said
if
there are 11.
MEPCO is whatever statewide, but it seems to me like there are a lot of options, so I didn't exactly understand that. But certainly being able to join with BOCES is something that is not a bad thing. I don't know how joining with BOCES is different than joining with the New York State with NISHIP, because I think that's probably their health consortium, but I don't know. If this is something for maybe more upstate communities, because I think we have a lot of options downstate, then I can't see trying to hinder anybody's ability to find a way to save themselves.
Well, it is ridiculously expensive and, so. I'm sure there are some upstate communities that really can't afford it, so they're looking for other options.
Does anybody else have any comments on those? No?
Good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then the last one, we just added one because I had gotten an email from Sarah Smiley, who's been before us to talk to us about PACE 2.0, and PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, which is basically, I'm now currently losing my words, financing options for clean energy infrastructure building improvements. Right now, it's only allowed by state law for already existing structures, and if we were to allow it in New York State for new construction, it would greatly incentivize, in the belief of those of us who are members of the Environmental Improvement Corporation, it would greatly incentivize more developers to consider green infrastructure building when they start to build. So instead of just retrofitting older buildings, which is also very necessary and important, this would give them an option to consider green infrastructure techniques right from the get-go. So the EIC has asked the member communities to send letters to our legislators supporting that, and that is just asking if you would give your blessing for us to send such a letter supporting this legislation.
Probably abstain.
Okay, I think that's a good idea, even though we're not
You
really
wanna send a
voting, it's
letter
just
to
a
yourself?
consensus. Yeah, it's just a consensus, but you can abstain from the consensus. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So with that, I would ask for a motion to go into executive session for advice of counsel, personnel, and contracts.
So, second.
All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you so much. So we will see you next week at the courthouse at 8688 Spring Street for our regular legislative session. And as mentioned, there's a lot of great things happening in and around Austin. And don't forget the farmers market at Market Square in the Village is on every week in the winter. Or it's the winter market, and I think that they maybe start a little bit later and close a little bit earlier. So maybe it goes from 9 to 1. But they still do have great options for you, so please come on out and take full advantage of all that we have to offer here in town and village of Austin and Briarcliff. Have a great night, everybody.